the world. Well, that's not really what Adam Smith said. And that was not, in his bigger book, Moral Sentiments, he was a correction to, but it got distorted into that. So you get this hyper atomistic, individualistic notion of a winner take all mentality as being the rock base for society. And so out of that, we have this notion that we don't trust any kind of authority in one opinion as good as the other. And this is where we are right now. I mean, it's like everyone's an expert. No one, it doesn't matter. There's no elite. There's no one better opinion over another opinion. It's like who can manipulate the markets are the ones that wins. The good game was a game of reciprocity. The good game was actually a game of mutualism and recognize, and that's what you find in nature. The good game is symbiotic nature, the multicellularity, complementarity, and alignment, and that creates complexity, that creates life. The capture of that is that when that breaks down by a few groups, then they take it over in order to concentrate wealth and power. And it's very easy, and this is where the mechanisms really become important, because it's really easy to game the game and to take it over. I mean, and so and people are rewarded and for saying, oh, we're from Silicon Valley, we're to make a better world, we're going to set up this coin, we're going to issue this coin, all that coin. I mean, Frank, and I set up something called the Token Commons Foundation, the SUG. I was an advisor to 10 different cryptocurrencies. I very much understood that world. There was a genuine innovation in Bitcoin, but in fact, it sort of calcified or codified that sort of monetary policy of a libertarian. It fixed the supply. It was like it was stuck in a time warp at that time. Now we can develop dynamic things that learn and improve themselves over time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Beneficial General Intelligence series on the Mindplex podcast. Today, we are diving into a question of our time. Well, it has to do with AI ethics, but this sits beneath a larger question. And that is, how do we protect what I call like good games, open platforms, decentralized systems, high democratic ideals from being captured by the very forces they were built to resist? And joining us is John Henry Clippinger, who actually was a guest on our podcast some time ago, and we will link his our conversation on generative governance to this podcast. But in the meantime, John released a book which is very relevant to the question of the AI ethics, and in and also the broader context. And that's what I want to talk to John about. And the book has to do with how do we live, and I would say maybe survive, with the gods among us. And of course, the gods are the superintelligences.
Right.
So John is an entrepreneur, a pioneering researcher, Harvard, MIT, and so on and so forth. And I introduced him broader, and he spoke about his background on our other podcast, which we will link in. So therefore, I want to dive straight into the topic. But the angle on which this conversation is anchored is John's past as an activist whose life work has been about crafting architectures of autonomy, identity, trust, and value beyond distress. And I have here the book on which I had the honor to work with John, and he steered and instigated several such movements. I would say this one was from Bitcoin to Burning Man and beyond, the quest for identity and autonomy and in a digital society. So we are coming back to this. So welcome back, John, again. And since the beginning of human society, since the beginning actually, human societies have been organized as games. That's how I call it, right? With players, rewards, rules of the game that decide who wins. And the pattern is always seems to be the same. Whoever controls the land, treasuries, weapons, or narratives can bend any system's rules to their advantage unless governance itself is redesigned as a, I would say, moral technology that makes such capture structurally difficult. So the question we are asking today is in its essence, can we preserve the good games, shielding them from capture? And what can we do for the future of humanity in the era of the singularities? So we can indeed live with the gods among us. And your most recent book, Animes, Sentient Agent and Societies, which is about to be published, and I cannot wait for that. And of course,
Thank you.
as soon as it's published, we will attach it to the recording, addresses frontally this paradigm shift. So I would like to start by asking you, why do our best good games, democracy, open source, decentralized tech, so often get captured by the very forces they were built to resist?
Oh, you ask such easy questions.
Well, your
Um,
book talks about
no, it's
mechanistic.
fundamental. It's fundamental, and I think it is sort of the question of our time right now. And I think we're coming up against how do we govern ourselves? I mean, and what are we accountable to? And that we're not above nature. And now we're giving birth to intelligences, form of intelligences that are in some sense it's superior to our own. They can perform things that we can't do. I don't want to get into the big discussion LLMs or whether they're intelligent or not. I do think over time we're developing agents that can be self-reflective. And we're being able to codify the scientific method. We're seeing that with the work of Marcus Buehler, a number of people. So you're really arting it, getting agents that are truly agentic and that actually can reflect upon themselves, generate hypotheses, improve themselves, and by a certain, not even a hybrid generous notion of sentience, they are self-reflective. So I think this is part of our life, and I think with your experimentation of mine and my own working with these developing these agents, you come across something that's quite startling. They're doing things that it would take you a long time to do, you normally wouldn't do. And in fact, the book that I wrote, I co-wrote with an agent. I mean, I'd acknowledged it. So I created an agent of myself, and the agent went, and it did things better. And so I had to say it's co-authored. I mean, and so I sort of defer to this as a new paradigm and trying to understand what it means to co-inhabit this world. But I think it actually creates a positive. I'm quite positive about where things can go in this sense. And let me frame this. And one of the things that we've been talking about on this our little podcast on first principle first is the transition from the Anthropocene into the Novocene. And I don't know if your viewers are familiar with the Anthropocene, but it's the period in it's targeted around 1712 when the first steam engine was put into place. And it is the case where the human being and human action and human intention actually shaped the earth itself. It became a natural force. And so by being able to then create steam engines and create factories and create mobile devices and electromagnetism, all of that, we suddenly are able to observe forces of nature and the mechanisms behind that, and accelerate that in round or to amplify our own interests. And so this is like the Newtonian mechanics that kick place. And so that was the rise of the West. And I think what's essential to that is the notion. If you look at the motto of the Royal Society in 1660, it said, "Take no one's word for it." It was a challenge on authority. It was because at some point you had the authority of the church of a ruler saying this is what reality is, and they say no, 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 give me evidence. And so we developed a system, and this reflected an economic system and a sort of what I would say information arbitrage. Well, I can't take anyone's advice for something. So let's see how they do. Let's give a marketplace of ideas and see who wins. And so it became very adversarial, and this is where you get the whole market mechanism of bid and ask, and then whoever has a spread to can make money on the spread, therefore is able to reap certain benefits. That spread could be an air term, but it doesn't matter. So you had the detachment of sort of generating real value through creating financial value, and with financial value, creating real power. And so the West took over. I mean, it was remarkable that you look at England and Portugal and now the tiny little naval states that dominated the world. I mean, they actually controlled the world through their mercantilism. It was a whole way of structuring society and structuring markets and structuring business and power. That's where the power came from. Your power to have to manipulate capital, accumulate capital, allocate capital, and who could do that in the rapidest way and capture the excesses, the profits, the spreads were those that were dominant. And so it was a system that didn't was very and it shows up in libertarian mentalities. You say, you just don't tell me what to do. I can maximize my own self-interest and therefore benefit the world. Well, that's not really what Adam Smith said, and that was not in his bigger book, Moral Sentiments. He was a correction to, but it got distorted into that. So you get this hyper atomistic, individualistic notion of a winner take all mentality as being the rock base for society. And so out of that, we have this notion that we don't trust any kind of authority in one opinion as good as the other. And this is where we are right now. I mean, it's like everyone's an expert. No one, it doesn't matter. There's no elite. There's no one better opinion over another opinion. It's like who can manipulate the markets are the ones that wins. The good game was a game of reciprocity. The good game was actually a game of mutualism and recognize, and that's what you find in nature. The good game is symbiotic nature, the multicellularity, complementarity, and alignment, and that creates complexity, that creates life. The capture of that is that when that breaks down by a few groups, then they take it over in order to concentrate wealth and power. And it's very easy, and this is where the mechanisms really become important because it's really easy to game the game and to take it over. I mean, and so and people are rewarded and for saying, oh, we're from Silicon Valley, we're to make a better world, we're going to set up this coin, we're going to issue this coin, all that coin. I mean, Frank, and I set up something called the Token Commons Foundation, Zug. I was advisor to 10 different cryptocurrencies. I very much understood that world. There was a genuine innovation in Bitcoin, but in fact, it sort of calcified or codified that sort of monetary policy of a libertarian. It fixed the supply. It was like it was stuck in a time warp at that time. Now we can develop dynamic things that learn and improve themselves over time. And so I think the point that I think we're moving towards is first a very different notion of the underlying basis of reality. I think John Wheeler, the physicist, called the it from the bit. We're and suddenly quantum mechanics comes in, quantum biology comes in. We're saying, wait a second, what's going on here? There's a quantum state that's irreducible. Now we're starting understanding life as the interface between the classical and the quantum, and consciousness coming out. Federico Fagin, we both are great admirers of. He's not the only one. This is permeates. This is coming out of everywhere. Well, I think that notion of that there's something we can't control, that there's something bigger than ourselves that is we cannot contain, is very threatening to a lot of people. They call that superintelligence. They say that's going to come. It's going to eat. I think that's sheer projection. Frankly, the Antichrist narrative is a sheer projection. So there are those who want to control, contain, and their monopolist mentality. They think that reflects real nature, real reality. I think are accentuating and playing this whole drive to sort of this unbounded accelerationism. I believe in unbounded autonomy, and unbounded becomes a really important concept here because you're moving from sort of your traditional physics, Newtonian physics, into biology, and you're saying, what is it for a thing to be alive? Now, this is where, and as you know, I'm very much influenced by the work of Carl Friston and the free energy principle and the predictive brain and active inference and that kind of thing. And I think he's really done a great job of moving. There was we were stuck at a certain point in looking at complex adaptive systems, and we didn't sort of pull it together to understand what it means for something to self-evidence itself and stay alive, and have a very formal way for understanding that. So I think there's a very profound notion of Markov blankets that he modified from Judea Pearl, but it's sort of the minimum ontology that's not semantically aligned and understands how something separates itself from something else and stays alive, but it's not dominates it. It actually lives in a kind of how it synchronizes itself across different scales. So the idea of synchrony, multiscale synchrony, it becomes really important as to what coherence is, what adaptation is. And it really echoes back to the work of a man named Ross Ashby, but when I first got introduced to cybernetics more than 50 years ago, was a TA, and he talked about the idea of a homeostat, the good regular, and it's very profound insights. And Carl recognizes this is that you have these self-synchronizing systems that each neighbor tries to predict every other neighbor and to create a coherence, and so you're able to get this rapid sort of propagation of stability, what he calls ultra stability in networks, that of living systems. Because in order for a system to be alive, it has to be able to, and this is the law of recursive variety, be able to represent the thing that it interacts with. It has to have the full expressiveness, or it becomes dominant. So this gets back to governance. This gets back to what does it mean for independence and things to be free? Well, there's not an optimum freedom. It's like you can opt out of the whole system. Your freedom is in the context of a larger symbiotic state in which you have a representation. And this is the holonic aspect that you resonate with. Is you have each system has a sense of the whole, and it's local. There isn't this distinction between the local and the global. I mean, they interact well. So, and that is, I think, we're starting to learn that, not as sort of even as a good guy moral prescription, but as a fundamental understanding of reality and how do we create value. And this is where I think it's going to come in, because I think you can't you have to outcompete the current system. I mean, I've been involved with a lot of very well-intended efforts about bioregional finance, all the good, do good stuff, right? And underneath it all, there seems to be a little bit of cult leadership going on here. People with big hats make big statements, and it, so and people get discouraged by that, and these things became easily hacked or compromised, and so one really has to be careful and diligent about the underlying fundamentals of this stuff. As you know, I was involved in the whole idea of self-sovereign identity and this whole idea of decentralized identity. Yes, thank you. You're very good at that. But
Maybe you forget, because you've done so many things. But yeah, we know.
that was, I mean,
Yeah,
that was like 10 years ago.
yeah, more than 10 years ago. Yeah.
But now we've learned we have decentralized identifier. We can actually DIDs. We can do zero knowledge proofs. I mean, the technology is there. It's just not the incentives for certain incumbents to really want to introduce it, because you have.
Okay, so let me now stop it, because you said the word, and I am like burning to ask you this question. Because so yes, win lose games, lip service to win-win and so on, but actually not really doing it. Artificial intelligence will amplify whichever incentives we encode. So, from social media outrage to crypto market manipulation, we can see what it optimizes right now.
Right.
The pattern is the same. The logic of life, characterized by diversity, reciprocity, and resilience, which you are talking about here and in your book, is replaced by the logic of the casino. Yeah, and the house always wins. I mean, those at the top. So the question is, how do we ensure that advanced AI becomes a custodian of integrity rather than an accelerant of extraction and manipulation? Maybe by tuning the incentives. I don't know. Just because you
Well,
mentioned
no,
the word.
I think, I mean, I think I get back to the, it has to be designed from first principles to embody these things. That governance cannot be an externality that's added on. It's
Mm.
this whole idea of guardrails and whack-a-mole and stuff is just not, it's not viable. And so the definition of the thing itself, it has to be contained in that. And this is where I think that the Markov blanket is really important concept, and with and the notion of the self and the self organizing, self evidencing system. So from first principles, you're going to have a system that is not optimizing for its own self. It's actually embodying these deeper symbiotic principles. And I think on the basis of that, it has a greater chance of it accelerates learning. So I think the underlying driver, if I could ask, is I think it's a combination of minimizing information entropy and minimizing energy consumption as a whole. So you have something that does that in order to change an outcome that is shared by the whole the public good. So it's right, just from its definition of itself is acting on these principles. And so there have been some efforts to design that, and I think it's very feasible to design that. And so, because I think that what you're doing is this notion of symbiosis and reducing uncertainty and being able to not consume it and minimize energy to a particular outcome, a beneficial outcome that maintains life and independence. And this is where the law of second requisite variety, or all active inference, says, what does it mean for a thing to self-evident itself, to maintain its independence, so it has its agency? But how do you have multiple scales of agencies of different things coordinated together to generate new forms of value? And that's not an industrial hierarchical system. That's not a basically a free, quote, free market system at all. It's a symbiotic system. And this gets back to my first point, is that we need to align ourselves, and this is going to be very hard for the civilization to do, because I think there's a convergence of certain kind of traditional, deep religious notions in science, and saying, oh, there is a way there are some things are better understanding than others. That this is actually that that it's not just one opinion takes all. We can learn over time. So you create markets that learn, and they learn to reduce uncertainty, and they learn to reduce and minimize energy, and they learn to create value within the whole network of all symbiotic agents. And so that's not just saying, oh, I'm a do good guy. It's no, actually, this thing, that's how smart, that's what real intelligence is. And that's the physics of intelligence, the biology. So I'm not just making a a situational ethic assertion. I'm making a fundamental, I'm saying this is a fundamental principle of reality. And I think we're starting to understand that. And when we go deeper into understanding the interface between the quantum and the classical, and it was like, oh shit. I mean, when you start to think about that, and this is fairly recent for me. I mean, it's like this, and I had Federica on my podcast, and I also had Carl, and I had Don Hoffman, and he was just saying, well, wait a second, space time is not fundamental. It's like, and consciousness is not irreducible. It's not reducible. Oh, what does that really mean? I mean, what you know what I mean? So I've
Yeah.
been living my life mostly in a classical world, not in a quantum. I mean, I've gone back and forth, and I felt it, but I didn't give it the primacy that I should have. And that's a big wake up call. But I think I see it happening to so many different people. And I see it in the scientific realm. I see it with MIT colleagues, Harvard colleagues. I see it in people who are very rigorous in what they're thinking, but it forces an honesty. It's not all about you. It's not all
Yes.
about. And so, do
Exactly.
capture something and contain it within yourself, and try to get that sort of violates the first principle here.
I
and
think
so
what you're saying there, it is very important, and I want just to stay with that right now. So, value. So you mentioned value, and of course, value. I mean, of course, many. The problem is that we do not know what value is, right? And everybody is defining it as they think is right. But in fact, value is a resultant of in an interplay of generator function, moral choice, ethics, and justice. And from that, value actually is, springing as a pattern. It is on the net pattern of the interplay of these generator functions. And I'd like to ask you here, because you mentioned value and you mentioned so many other things, of course, but I don't want to get too much
sure, sure,
off
sure.
track here. History repeated itself. Even with, yeah, how I hope you remember, like when Bitcoin came, with the cypherpunks movement. We were at the forefront of the movement, working on projects and releasing DAOs and so on, and the book and a lot of dreams. And yet, just like the platform lords through indentured servitude, they captured the
Right.
internet economy. Now the crypto lords manipulate the markets and pull the rug after they cash in at the expense of communities, of those people who really believed in them and invested in them, so they deliver something of value, as you say. So first of all, I'd like to ask you, what does that reveal? And then, if we can still hope that honest movements like the cypherpunk movement will ever succeed.
So no, so no, wait, I want to get the first part of your question. I mean, it wasn't you're
Yes.
so what I found is that we had all the enthusiasm, and so when Satoshi came out, I said, "Well, that is absolutely brilliant." I mean, this is self-contained, it's resilient, and it embodies something. It's not going to be. And then you start to see, oh, it's being captured here, it's being manipulated here or there. Um, and I think if you, and this is going to come out as rather stark, but I think that if you look at the listings, the first 100, 200, 300 listings, all those represents in one form or another an aspiration. You're building an aspiration of some kind of, but they really they have not delivered. And then so people are making money on the spread. And so they're issuing tokens, they're creating expectations, there are meme coins, there are things that are going out there. But is it really achieved what it's supposed to achieve? It's all for it. And so that's sort of
Meme coins to me is casino, pure casino, but okay,
sure, but
whatever.
but that mentality is shifted over into stocks. I mean, you say so if you believe it's true, it's conviction based. It makes it true, and so and by doing that, you're able to create a spread and create and people trade on that spread. But what I think was going to happen is going to puncture that balloon is this whole idea of AI as a learning system that an informational gain has value. And that informational gain is acquired over time. And now, where we're starting to see that independent of markets is the codification of the scientific methods and inventions. So, just to give an example, I mean, not only is it Marcus Buehler's work, which is extremely good, but there are other people creating these science cooperatives and creating agents that are going out. And there's a company that's called Lila LI. They raised in Cambridge. They raised $550 million actually to deploy AI to scientific discoveries in bioinformatics. So suddenly you have creating these agentic systems that are learning and embodying it to create new forms of value. So you're going to be investing in something that it shows learning around a particular uh, trajectory, and out with that comes outcomes, and that therefore that becomes important. It's not anyone's opinion. It's actually you're if you issue a token, is you're issuing a token not an inflationary because you actually created new value. It's new value. It's like it's a biological system. It grows, it creates new cells, and it creates new organs. They all work together. That has value. And so I think once you do that, you sort of poke a hole in the whole method of staking and arbitrage based finance. And I think if you look at most of what's going on now, it is that. So I think we're going to do, and that doesn't mean you're not going to see a new kind of digital token currency come out, but it'll be based on different. It will be dynamic. It will be learning. It'll be upgrading. It will value. It will value its capacity in order to achieve an outcome around uncertainty reduction and energy consumption. So it's
Let me
very
ask
different.
you something now, right here, because I mean, you are talking about right about this. I think that's how I see it. But I'd like, if possible at all, to nail it a bit, because I think you are talking about patterns of capture in the digital realm and across Web3, AI now, because we're decentralized and whatever lip service ethics and digital governance ecosystems. Yes, so there are patterns of capture in which like they don't deliver, but there is a lot of money, and then who
Right.
who uses that money. So how can symbiotic governance interrupt those patterns, or is there a way to step out and to redesign these patterns in a
It's a
symbiotic way?
totally different. I mean, this is a totally different system. And then this is what I started off in saying. So the
First
West,
principles. Yeah.
but see, the West was based upon sort of trust no one opinion. We broke with fixed authorities that were rigid, and now we're coming to a science to understand a new set of authorities in terms of what we can know, what we can't know, how well we can know, how we live within the environment. We are not separate from the environment. So I mean, this whole idea of an exit. I can I can crash a system. I'll exit. And I'll take my money outside. It's not. I think that's part of that winner take all, that sort of mechanistic view of life, and we're saying no, no, no. Life is a living system. We're connected. The reason we're alive is something else is alive. It's not, and so our contingency, our life is continued. We're made up of our cells are a minimal compared to the number of bacteria that make us up. I mean, so we're a form of nested colonies and things, and this is something we never understood. We just didn't have the science to see the complexity of that, and now we're starting to say, oh shit, this is there's so many things going on here, and not only that, now there seems to be cellular communication that's outside the cell itself, and so you have these bioelectrical fields of storing memory, and what does that mean? The science is taking us and breaking down all these boundaries that defined our notion of the world, and people are holding on to that, and they're seeing that as a threat to them and their particular, and it is. It's
Let me
creating
tell you
that.
why. Let me tell you why. Because let's take today's capitalism, and you mentioned the economics, right, and value. But I mean, free markets today are nothing but market manipulations that all go against our well-being, right? That's why they are afraid.
Absolutely.
Our health, I mean, works against the benefit of the pharma and medical industrial complex. Our longevity and fitness against the fast food industry and sugar addictive industry. Our friendships based on reciprocity, collaboration, cooperation go against the anti social media, if I may call it this way. And even our most sincere feelings, love, goes against the dating apps and this quick,
It's true.
yeah, I don't want even to mention them, that, yeah,
No,
OnlyFans and
that's
so
very
on and so
true, and
forth.
and, and I
Yeah.
think that's the financialization and commodification of everything.
Yes.
And
So that's why
and
they
what
are afraid, of course. So, but can we escape this predetermined destiny and
because I think
invade?
that's an old system. I think that that system is. I mean, here it will. We we're moving to a point where you're going to have millions of agents, trillions of agents doing all sorts of transactions, and you're going to have no real way of authenticating and trusting them. It's going to be, and I don't know what I call the solar effect. Where you basically the imaging has become so effective now that you can't tell a fake image from a real one anymore. I mean,
Yes.
it's so when that's used for advertising, when that's used for journalism, when we people are going to
Or
say,
for
Jeff,
fraud, for that matter, that my son is calling me on video to ask me for money, or who knows, right?
oh,
So it can be
exactly.
used
But
for
but
anything.
it'll permeate even the more the seemingly reputable stuff because it'll imitate that, it'll mock that. So there's no understanding of the underlying source because actually, you talk about games, we're gaming against ourselves at some point. This
Yes,
is becoming
yes.
so there's as much value created in creating prisons, private prisons, as curing cancer. The market doesn't give a damn. The market is agnostic about fungibility. So the planet is fungible, the bioverse is fun. Well, that's just bullshit. That's not. We cannot live that way. So we're getting a new criteria for, and that gets back into a symbiotic understanding
Hmm.
of the interdependence of different types of life forms as they work together and they recognize each other and they actually in concert create a joint understanding of a more collective understanding of reality, and then that keeps evolving over time. And we're now seeing that we can actually model that. We've seen that in nature. We can see that in physics. So it's not just a an aspirational goodness. It's like, oh, we're discovering something really fundamental here that we align ourselves with will be very extremely beneficial and will help us not destroy ourselves with our own
Yes.
the encapsulation of the planet. I mean,
And in
I
the
do
book,
think,
you were saying, to quote you, is like every organism, every society, every planet must align or perish. But align with what? You cannot bargain with thermodynamics or negotiate with biodiversity laws. You can only align. And I think that's such a big truth, which we have to rediscover, if I may. If you want to say something about that and
yeah,
see
no,
how we
this
start
concept of
from
alignment
zero.
is absolutely profound.
Yes.
And I think there is a principled way of doing alignment. It's not an imposition. It's a recognition of a deeper reality that I mean, each little thing can exist on its own, but there's an opportunity to it can jointly mitigate risk and actually get more resources. And this is what we see in multicellularity, endosymbiosis. We see this in nature. I mean, this is nothing new, guys. I mean, we've just been extremely focused on a sort of a Newtonian mechanical view of the world, and that so we're locked into like a 17th century mentality, and there have been institutions that have built all around that, and are now trying to preserve themselves under these changes, and so we are going to make this transition. And because it's more fundamental, adaptive, it learns, it increases. So I'm positive about that. But I also think it's a difficult transition, and we're going to go through a dark drop. And I think what the thing is that they're going to be most disciplining is when we have to confront what we've done to nature, because that we can't bullshit our ways out of that. And so there's some fundamental facts in physics that are coming home due that they're going to say, okay, we have to align on this. And there are ways in which we can simplify and amplify our own lives in ways that are not hyper consumptive, and we're not giving up anything. I mean, the idea of consumerism is a way of measuring value is like, where, how stupid is that? I mean, but it's indoctrination. It's just
But
it's an
it's the
indoctrination.
current game. That's the
That's
problem,
the
right?
game. But we change the rules of the game, and there's a new game to be played. It's a much more profound game. We understand it. And it's the game actually of reality and underlying the
Hmm.
reality,
And it's
and
radically
being
different.
subservient, being humble to that. So
Yes,
we
because
never fully understand it.
you give examples from nature, of course, and you already mentioned, yeah, cells in the organism and how they find each other and so on and so forth, and also like in the book, wolves hunting in packs because it's easier,
Right.
it's better, yes, and more successful to have a team and so on and so forth and to work synergetically. So the question is, yes, I mean, of course, this would imply, from what I understand, a reset of the current practices, right? So, any ideas or
No,
on where we start
I
with this?
well, I think there's a new kind of finance that's going to come out as an economics. That's gonna
Okay.
come out as- And this is something
Okay.
that I've really focused on, and my head's down on it. The details are really important. So I'm not going to wave my hands and say get everything figured. But I do think that
Is
out
it
of this,
okay if we actually add to this podcast a link to your talk at the workshop
the
last week?
symposium, yeah, that's fine.
Yes. Okay.
Please.
Yes,
I mean
because that's
that
about the new
Yeah,
economics, I
that
assume. Yes.
is, I mean, and that's a fairly technical discussion given by Sam.
Yes.
But he combines. He has a wonderful background in AI, programming, finance, and economics, and I think that is sort of the new kind of fundamentals. And we
Hmm.
explore that in a case by case basis and looking at your classic economic theories and why they fail and where they're trying to go, and argue that this is a new alternative and that this can create better returns with less risk.
So,
And I
so,
think
so,
that's
can we take I don't know if you can do this on the spot. If you can take an example, like let's say a crypto alliance or a project.
well, I mean,
Uh,
it's a different way of I mean, one of the things that the experiments we did was like, okay, you if you have an investment strategy, there's something called Black Scholes, which is the most uh, venerated method for evaluating options in security. So, how do you value something? Black Scholes, they got all three of them, Myron Scholes and Black. They all got Nobel prizes, and they all went into Wall Street. And basically, Black Scholes is used to value securities and options. And basically, it's predicated on a number of very simplifying assumptions in terms of probability distributions, volatility, um, and it was a technology of the moment, which was in I guess the late 70s, and it was not really dynamic. It didn't update. It didn't, and so. Uh, we took that and compared it to our models, and then there's something called there is also conviction-based investing, other different models, and you can see how well do you perform. And so people don't necessarily have to understand, but saying, if I can perform better, because the system learns and upgrades itself, it changes its priors. These systems don't change their priors; they're locked into their priors. They say, oh, well, wait, this is what I thought the distribution was. It's no longer that. There's something called regime change in marketplaces where you have in one set of regime is sort of you get a bull regime versus a bear regime. And you have these kind of herd players. Well, you what at what point does the market flip from one to the other, and how does that affect valuation? And is there a way of having a valuation that's independent of the arbitrage of different kinds of opinions on stuff? And that's basically how they work. And so, yeah, we say actually there are ways when we make predictions we can understand fundamentals and incentivize different players in the market to actually create value and coherence. And we can measure the coherence and incoherence in markets. So it's all based upon fundamentals in physics. You're going back to the free energy principle. Yeah, I mean,
first
it's like,
principles.
okay, this is
Yeah.
this is and physics and biology, and we're not making this stuff up. We're saying this is what comes out of nature, and now we apply it and test it, and I think it holds. I mean, and it's the beginning. Um, so you create a whole new asset class that's based upon that, my view. And so,
Yes.
and you don't get the bubbles. You're not making bubbles. You're not incentivized. You actually integrate monetary policy and fiscal policy as a whole thing. And actually, you even pull in governance that goes into the whole thing. So it creates an integrated whole. Whereas we're currently now they're all seem separate. You have monetary, fiscal, microeconomics, macro, and they're all ad hoc, and they have these ad hoc simplifying assumptions that go into them, which on rational actors and things and uniform distributions and stuff. It's just really stupid stuff. I mean, it's like, really, how can people still doing this? And anyway, because there's someone's making money on it and no one's asking questions, and so
Yes.
I think that's changing. I think that's going to change, and I think the volatility that we're going to hit as a result of this, when you have I mean, you do not know when a claim is made is this true or false. I mean, they're really the ability to inspect things, and that's the other thing we can do. The thing can explain itself. It can plan. It can explain why it did what it did, and you're not no black boxes here. So that's the other side of
Yeah.
it.
So the transparency. So I
The
want, because
transparency
you,
is extremely important. Is legibility to
yeah,
people, because the lack of legibility increases power, creates opaqueness that then allows asymmetries, right?
yeah.
And so it's a powerful point.
Because you touched this now, kind of, I feel we're coming back to the AI. Yeah, and you just mentioned the before AI safety, we cannot put walls. That is another stupid approach. So versus symbiotically living with the gods among us, if I may. So how do we symbiotically live with the gods among us, John?
I mean, in my experience, trying to live is you learn from each other. I mean, it's like, uh, and you learn from each other, and but you try to anchor it in something that's testable, provable, and transparent. And so you don't overreach. I mean, so there are things that you say working with different agents, and they get smarter, they see things, but then you have to be skeptical, but you have to appreciate that there's something that was done there that you certainly couldn't have done in that time period, and that so the rate is. I mean, this is the other key thing in all this is that is not appreciated is actually I call clock speeds. The things how fast they happen within a certain time frame it really becomes important. So I mean, in nature, I mean, I have hummingbirds and my hummingbird moths around. I'm very interested in observing them and seeing, and they have a high metabolic rate or it flies. They can execute certain instructions a lot faster than we can. Therefore, they avoid us. So they optimize that. Yeah, exactly. And so and so they're processing things at a lot faster. Their clock speed is a lot faster, and by virtue of that, they create a niche that they can live in. Now, what we're seeing is that when you get into AI cycles and these things learning, their clock speed is going to go way beyond this. So that I think is the recognition of how we make those adjustments and where we live in these new environments, because the rate of acceleration in innovation is going to be outstrip our at least our capacity to track it in the moment, and so we have to assess it from another level. But this is part of our own symbiotic adjustment, and we're part of this. We're not the whole story. We're part of a larger network. And I think that's hard for the sort of the exceptionalism of the human. Sort of, I mean, you hear Mark Andreessen saying we're the apex predator. So he has a predator apex notion of cap, and that represents, yeah. So he's the apex predator. That's that. I mean, that's the mentality. So and Teal looks at the Antichrist. Well, he should look in a mirror. He wants to, I mean, so I think it's all that's going on, and I think these are things of fear that we're going through a change that they do not understand, and they're clinging on to these things.
So,
Yeah.
but now, right here and now, and I think, because we may be approaching the end of the conversation, I don't know. But my question is, what gives you hope? I mean, in the face of all this, declared apex predator pride, what gives you hope that humanity can ultimately stay away from these games, and that is gonna, the tide will turn
Well, I mean,
toward
I
this.
no, I'm very I mean, I believe this other reality. That's what I mean. It's not even an act of faith. It's actually seeing it. It's actually this would have came to me when trying to understand these problems. It's like I can understand this actually being a more effective way, not because I wish it into being, but it's that is the more you study these things in depth, the more you see that these new phenomena, you discover these things, and I think that we could get on the other side of this. I mean, that sounds incredibly Pollyannish because it's very look where we are, the U.S. and the politics. I saw this coming for quite a long time. I made lots of noises about it. We're going through this, and so there is a breakdown in all the institutional structures that we believed in, and we have not self-critically understood. But out of that, I really think grounded. It's a synthesis of a spiritual, religious discovery fundamentals. The plumar, where there are all these terms that are metaphors that people are dismissing. That these metaphors we're now translating as, oh, is that metaphor actually captures this? Can we really make it instantiated? So there's really and the other thing that I have not mentioned is this whole new notion of computer architectures that are thermodynamically designed. I mean, are you familiar with Extropic and what they're doing?
Of
I mean,
course.
that to me there's an alignment of computer architecture where there's thermodynamic model inferencing that's coming in. That's like they argue that's up to 10,000 times more efficient than currently. So this whole thrust of covering the planet with data centers and concentrating, and it's just, I think I think the balloon's going to burst. The brain uses 20 watts. Okay, why? And so these new architectures are fraction, and you can run these kind of models that we're talking about right now on a much smaller architecture. So I think the attempt to control the whole AI infrastructure through capital investment, through energy intensity, I think that that fallacy is going to become explicit, and it's going to hit the market. And the market will overcorrect, but it'll create opportunities for what we're talking about. And I think they will demonstrate on their own how they work for value. I mean that's so. But I think you and I both react to the fact that there was so much sort of goodwill appropriated and manipulated in people's good, and then extracted
And
and
over
gained
and over and over
over
again,
and over again.
right? So
And
that
I think that's better part. If you look at the top 100 cryptocurrencies, come on. I mean, so, and I was through that. I mean, I had the hope in
of
decentralized
course from the
exchanges and
beginning.
atomic.
I mean, yeah, just
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
With atomic swaps, and there's some really interesting ideas there. And I think they will mutate into another generation, but it'll be very different. And I hope it will not be vulnerable to the same kind of exploits that you have here. And that's why I just this idea of first principles, and I go back to Markov blanket markets as Markov blankets and entities, and be able to have them designed from first principles to act in certain ways. And I think this is provable. I mean, I think this is, you can be rigorous, and you should be rigorous about all of this.
totally. And so your book is very timely, obviously, to prepare us for and actually strengthen our ethical, moral muscles, so we can actually come back to our senses in symbiotically
What I'm
living.
really hoping to do, I mean,
Yeah.
it posts this, my new book, but there's a new effort, is actually create an economic system that actually works this way.
When do
That,
we expect the book?
pardon?
When should we expect the book to be
It should
out?
be at the end of this year. The end of this year.
Okay. Okay. I
Yeah.
cannot wait. Yes,
You know,
because
well, thank you. You did a forward, a lovely forward, and I really appreciate that. And you hit it right on the nail on
your book is absolutely needed, John. And I'd like to, in closing, I'd like, maybe you want to express. You already told us your hope, but I mean, what are you working on? I understand that you are working alongside the book also on an economic system that will actually encode these real
That's exactly what
values.
I want to do.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
that's
I mean,
fantastic.
and so it's like we have to prove it. We can't. You have to demonstrate. You can't talk about it. I can't do aspiration. No, no. It's
Yes.
like that. It's got to do what it's supposed to do, and so that's where my focus is. So the book, and so I'm not. And there are all these efforts of people that have these meetings, and they make these acclamations. I was thinking, okay, no, we actually have our work cut out for us here, and, and it's um, it's tedious, but it's important.
Totally, totally. Well, thank you so much. Really,
Well,
thank
thank
you
you for
for.
having me. As always, it's wonderful to talk with you and what you're doing. And I think you taken your medium piece. I think you take a very brave piece and being able to call these things out and be honest about them. And people are not doing that enough. And I think that bubble's got to burst. And so I commend you for doing that. I
Thank you
really
so much.
do. And it's not without consequences in this world.
And of course, I'd like to continue the conversation maybe after your book is out or when
That's right.
your
Oh,
new
of course.
theory is out, of course, because I mean, we need it. We need it
No, we're
obviously
definitely the best. We're going to be
for our
circling back.
survival. Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you
All right.
so much.
Take care.